In today's breaking story, the Trump administration's shady plan to keep this little peach as the attorney general in New Jersey, well, it just suffered the same fate as Phil Leotardo, as the U.S. Court of Appeal for the Third Circuit rolled over Trump's scheme to circumvent the Constitution. Welcome to Occupy Democrats. Please hit that subscribe button if you want more stories about Trump losing, which apparently has been happening quite a bit lately. Now, today's breaking story from CBS, it includes red flags and plenty of bad news for dear old Donald. I guess this is what winning looks like now, eh? Okay, well, before we show you today's breaking story, let's catch up on the twisting and turning road that takes us to Newark, New Jersey.
Well, a legal battle is playing out that could determine whether New Jersey's top federal prosecutor has the authority to be in the job. A federal judge already ruled that Alina Habba is serving unlawfully as the state's acting U.S. attorney after her interim appointment by President Trump expired, though she remains in office while the Trump administration appeals. But now similar rulings against other Trump-appointed prosecutors in Nevada and California, Virginia, are raising the stakes and putting the spotlight back on the issue here. Joining us now to help explain what it all means and what could happen next is Jacob Elberg, a former federal prosecutor and law professor at Seton Hall Law School. Jacob, welcome back. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It seems now that this is snowballing. We're seeing judges reject interim U.S. attorneys from multiple states, as I mentioned. Why is that happening? Has there been a shift?
So part of what's going on is that typically when you have this sort of an issue arise, you would see the administration then change tack. When one court has raised the issue, you would expect around the country the administration to take steps to make sure to kind of nip that in the bud and make sure it wasn't going to be a problem. Instead, the administration just doubled down and kept proceeding in the same way. What we saw happen with Lindsay Halligan and the cases there, that they put her in place after all of these issues with Alina Habba had already occurred. And so we haven't seen any change in how courts are reacting to this. Courts are seeing this as a problem everywhere. But the administration isn't changing what they're doing, so it's just growing in size.
Yeah, I mean, Lindsay Halligan, as you mentioned, the U.S. Attorney for Virginia, a stunning move happened this week from the courts where they threw out politically motivated indictments against New York Attorney General Letitia James and former FBI Director James Comey, essentially saying those were unlawful because she's in the position unlawfully. Does that ramp up pressure on the courts reviewing Habba's case, which is currently in appeal?
Well, it adds even more attention to it. There are some differences really in the weeds between all the various cases. But the one here in New Jersey with Alina Habba is already teed up for the Third Circuit. And that's one where they've heard argument, they have the papers. And so we could be any time now getting a ruling from the Third Circuit. And with all of this at stake around the country, even more attention now is going to be put on that ruling.
And so we have that ruling. It's our breaking story, and it comes from CBS just this morning. Appeals court disqualifies Alina Habba, Trump's former personal lawyer, as acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey. A federal appeals court on Monday upheld a lower court decision that disqualified Alina Habba, who served as a personal lawyer to President Trump and as the acting U.S. attorney in New Jersey. The decision from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit was unanimous against the Trump administration, which has attempted to use a novel mechanism to place lawyers who have not received Senate approval into temporary U.S. attorney positions across the country. The U.S. District Judge Matthew Braun ruled in August that Habba had been serving without lawful authority since the beginning of July. When she was tapped to temporarily lead the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, Braun said that she must be disqualified from participating in ongoing cases. The Justice Department appealed that decision to the Third Circuit, which is now the first federal appeals court to weigh in on the administration's scheme for installing certain U.S. attorneys. Habba was tapped to serve as interim U.S. attorney in New Jersey earlier this year, but her appointment to the role was limited to 120 days unless the U.S. District Court in New Jersey voted to extend her tenure, or she was confirmed to the post by the Senate Haba's nomination, however, was unlikely to win approval in the upper chamber, as New Jersey's two senators, Democrats, Cory Booker and Andy Kim, opposed her nomination. Ahead of the 120-day deadline, the judges in New Jersey declined to allow Haba to continue serving as U.S. Attorney and instead voted to install her deputy, Desiree Lee Grace, to the position. But that decision was met with swift pushback from Attorney General Pam Bondi, who fired Grace. Then Mr. Trump and top administration officials employed a multi-step maneuver to keep Haba in the role of U.S. Attorney and get around the district court's decision. First, the president withdrew Haba's nomination for U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. Then, Haba resigns as interim U.S. Attorney. Bondi then appointed Haba as special attorney and to fill Grace's role as first assistant U.S. attorney. Finally, because the position as the New Jersey's top prosecutor was vacant, Haba was elevated to the role of acting U.S. attorney under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. In their decision, the judges on the Third Circuit found that the Trump administration's argument in support of Haba's role should raise a red flag, since it would allow the Justice Department to circumvent the Vacancies Act and effectively allow anyone to hold a U.S. attorney position indefinitely. Under the government's delegation theory, Haba may avoid the gauntlet of presidential appointments and Senate confirmation and serve as de facto U.S. attorney indefinitely. Judge Michael Fisher wrote for the court, "This view is so broad that it bypasses the constitutional presidential appointment and Senate confirmation process entirely. It also essentially eliminates the requirements of the FVRA and the U.S. Attorney's specific statute." Fisher was selected for the Third Circuit by President George W. Bush. He was joined in the decision by Judge L. Felipe Restrepo, appointed by President Barack Obama, and Judge D. Brooks Smith, tapped for the Third Circuit by Bush. The Trump administration has sought to install temporary U.S. attorneys in Nevada and Los Angeles using the mechanism it employed for Haba, but has faced resistance from the courts. The most high-profile of those decisions came last week when a federal judge ordered the criminal charges against former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James to be dismissed on the grounds that Lindsay Halligan, the interim U.S. attorney who secured their indictments, was unlawfully appointed to the role. Defeats and setbacks, the rats are jumping ship, insults abound, why it's just another week in Trump's decaying version of America. And, in the end, you can't say that Frank Zappa didn't warn us.
Dogma becomes legislation. That's when you have the danger. I have this horrible fear that the United States could wend its way toward being a fascist theocracy. The cross converted into a symbol of fascism in the service of politics. This is bad.